Welcome and get ready for a front row seat on Icons with Ava Johanna, the live show that is raising the bar in the entertainment space worldwide. You're about to be right in the middle of heart-pounding conversations and real-time connection that ignite transformation within. Our global live show stars the industry's powerhouses, visionaries, and cultural icons. Together, we'll walk the path of legendary entrepreneurs, influential business moguls, celebrities, and iconic brand architects. Join the conversation, seize the opportunity to engage directly with icons of their industries, and immerse yourself in an unparalleled learning experience. Icons isn't just a show. It's an opportunity to step into the minds and hearts of industry leaders and run with their advice. So grab your popcorn because this is the space where icons are born. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Icons. I am so excited for today's episode. And you guys know that every single person I have on this podcast is a little bit of a selfish desire to pick their brain and learn from them. And, I think that's one of the really epic things about podcasting. And this is something that I remember hearing very early on in my podcast journey is that it's such a gift as a podcast host to be able to have these conversations because you're really getting free mentorship in these, 45-minute, 60-minute conversations. So just know that this conversation, the questions I'm going to be asking are selfishly things that I want to know, but I also know that because we all are on the same journey together as women desiring to create impact, financial freedom, the ability to have optionality in our life, not just now, but for our future and for generations to come, that this entire conversation is going to be so poignant for you. So I'm so grateful that today we are joined by Tess Waresmith. And Tess is a Finance Bro free investor for millennial women. She teaches investing, she teaches financial education and financial literacy. And we have yet to have a conversation just specifically about taking your investments to the next level. So maybe you're somebody who is just starting out, you've never invested before. Maybe you're like me, you've got around a couple to tens of thousands of dollars, but it's not really doing anything. And you look at it and you're like, am I doing this right? Or are there things that I could be doing that are more advantageous? Or maybe you are a investing expert, but you just want to learn from Tess and see what else she has up her sleeve. Wherever you fall on the spectrum, know that we are going to make this a powerful, tangible, and very tactical episode for you to run with the advice of Tess and start making some big moves with your money. So Tess, without further ado, thank you for joining me on Icons.
Wow, that was such an introduction. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And I love the opportunity to talk about money. So I'm glad we're going to get into it today.
Yeah, me freaking too. And I feel like that within itself is already so different than what we are raised with for most people. I don't know about you, or I'm curious, like, was money something that was always very integrated into your family life, or was this something that you really had to explore on your own?
It was integrated from a fear perspective. So the reason why I became a good investor, and one is because I made a lot of mistakes. And I think that is a common thread, right? We make a big mistake and then we learn a lot from it. And so thankfully, I made my big money mistakes in my 20s and I learned how to invest. But I was always really focused on money because I grew up with a deep fear of not having enough. I remember hiding coins in different places. I remember my mother saying, we don't have enough money for this or that. We were middle class. We weren't really, really struggling or anything, but my mother and my stepdad had a deep fear of money and sort of like passed that on to me. And I also grew up in a family that had a lot of divorce and instability. So both my parents were married collectively 9 times. So
Wow.
So me and Dean Graciosi actually. So,
Right.
so
I remember you saying that. Yeah.
he's one of the few people that I've ever heard that have had that similar situation. But what it taught me was that no one else, you can't rely on anybody else financially. And that is a great lesson, but it also created a lot of fear. And so I have to still work on that part of my money mindset, and something I'll probably always work on, to be totally candid. That's not something you can just turn off. But yeah, I definitely had a relationship rooted in fear when it came to money. And now thankfully I'm unwinding that, and I've learned a lot along the way.
I'm so grateful that you brought in the element of like mindset and like emotional connection to money, even being in a position where maybe your family is middle class. And honestly, I feel like sometimes middle class is almost like the most mentally and emotionally jaded around money because the middle class can easily tip into poverty during big economic swings. And so it's interesting to even think about, I grew up middle class and then below the poverty line and then really had to build my way back on my own. So I have a very similar relationship with money that I've had to unwind too of yes, I need to be able to figure it out on my own and I need to be able to take care of myself because I can't rely on anybody else to take care of me. But like you said, it's like that's helpful to a T. How does that show up in relationships? How does that show up in, letting a partner be there for you and support you? So I'm curious, what do you think is the, how do I phrase this? If we were to look at it as like a pie altogether, financial freedom, creating wealth for yourself, being able to change your lineage and your family's line of relationship with money. If you were to look at the pie altogether, what piece of the pie or how big a piece of the pie is the mental and emotional?
It's a tough question to answer because I think it depends on what stage you're in, right?
Mm.
So if you're not really making any money, you can't build wealth and you can't possibly invest. And I do think it's really important that we understand that the first step towards building your wealth is earning money, and that's one piece of the puzzle. That's only one small piece of the puzzle, and I see this online all the time, lots of creators posting like I make this much money per month and this and that. You don't actually know, one, how much money they're taking home, and oftentimes it's a lot less than they're posting about. And then that is just one piece. Then what I want to know, and what I don't think we talk about enough, is once you have that money, what are you doing it with it, and how are you strategically allocating it? So back to your question about what percentage is mindset. I mean, in some ways it could be everything, because if you have it could be 100% if you're at the stage where you're not actively having an active relationship with your money. If you're so afraid that you haven't started to learn how to invest, if you have accounts that you're not even looking at, it doesn't matter how much money you're not going to build the wealth that you deserve and that you should be building so that you can make a bigger impact, have more influence, et cetera. So I think it kind of depends on the stage you're at. And if you are somebody that's listening to this and you are earning money, but you haven't looked into investing, you don't understand how your money is invested in the market, maybe you have some retirement accounts, but you have no idea what they're doing, that is a huge mental block. That's a limiting belief, because that tells me that, and this is not necessarily your fault, we don't get any education around that, but that tells me that you either don't believe that you're smart enough to learn it, so you've put it off. You think it's overwhelming and you think you don't have time to learn it, which is also fair because we hear so much financial jargon. It seems really complicated. And these are actually mindset issues, right? Like a lot of people listening to this podcast are incredible business owners, people doing amazing things. You've done a lot harder things than learn how to invest, right? So if you're at that point right now, it's 100% mental for you. And what I would challenge you to do after listening to this podcast is take one next step to start to open the door and have that conversation with yourself. Why haven't you looked at any of your investments? Why haven't you started investing? And what's holding you back?
So good. Okay, for everybody here live with us on YouTube, if you feel called to even share what comes up for you when Tess asked that, why haven't you started or what's holding you back? We'd love to see it in the chat. And I just want to remind you, if you are here live, feel free to drop any questions in the chat. I'll be checking it throughout the conversation. And I think that this is a really great opportunity if you do have questions around investing to get the advice of Tess, because she's here with us live and she has created some really incredible results for herself, but also alongside her clients. And we're going to dive into some of that throughout today's conversation. So this is really helpful. And I want to go back to one of the pieces you said around time. When you're just starting out learning about how to invest and work with your money in a way that's actually building upon it and compounding, how much time do you usually recommend for your clients when they're just starting out, like per week?
If you don't know anything about investing, I would say there's not a specific time. And because here's what I'll say. Once you learn the basics, it's a one-time skill. It's like riding a bike, right? Like once you learn how to put together a very simple investment portfolio, which might sound like a big, scary sentence to some of you, but once you learn that, one, you're going to realize it was not as hard as you thought it was to do that. And the other thing you're going to realize is that you don't have to spend a lot of time maintaining it. So the hardest part of investing is realizing that you are smart enough to learn it, which you are because you're listening to this podcast and you are motivated and empowered if you are. And number two, that it doesn't take that long to learn. So depending on how you choose, you could read $2, two bucks, I'm always talking about money, $2, two books, two simple books on financial literacy. And I'm happy to drop some of the names of books you could read, and you could learn how to create your own simple portfolio. I think the issue is that we think we have to be economic experts, personal finance experts. We have to have a PhD in finance to really understand this stuff. And none of that is true. So as far as there's so many things you can learn when it comes to investing, but I would say if you wanted to learn the basics, for example, my beginner investing course, it's 4 weeks long. It's an hour of online videos, and then we do an hour in person. And by the end of that, most of the women in the program know what type of investment accounts they want to open to save on taxes and what investments they want to choose. They do that in less than a month. The reason it works is because it's targeted. So the information is clear and it follows a certain framework that I've created to make it as easy as possible. And we ditch all the financial jargon and the BS that's not helpful, right? But it doesn't take as long as you think. So the commitment I would make to yourself is that by the end of the month, you're going to make some type of money move, whether that's even opening an account. You don't even have to start investing yet, but figure out what type of investing accounts are available to you. If you have an investing account already, learn a little bit about how your money is invested. Pick one of the investments you have in there and Google it. So it's a journey. You're not going to learn everything you need to know about investing in a month, but that doesn't mean you can't start investing confidently in a month if you've spent enough time every week, maybe an hour or two a week, to learn or to read a book. And the wonderful thing about these days is you can learn all of this on YouTube if that's your thing. You can learn it in a book. There's a bunch of people like me that offer different types of coaching or programs or courses. They're out there. So you just got to find somebody that jives with you, that's going to make it feel less intimidating and more welcoming, and you'll get really far in not a lot of time.
Mm. What's your favorite book? Like, what is the book that you think would be hands down at least the best place to start?
So if you're super beginner, I would say I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. He has a wonderful, approachable way of approaching finance, and the book is organized in a very organized way as well. So if you're totally new to money and investing is maybe something you're like, I want to do that, but I feel like there's some foundational stuff I need to work on, that book is great. And it covers a lot of different topics holistically. If you feel like you have a better handle on your cash flow and you're looking to learn how to actually create your own super simple investment portfolio that's hands off, that doesn't require you to day trade or any of that stuff, A Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins is also a great book. And I'll send the links to you.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link
Yeah.
those in the show notes for everybody that's watching the replay, or in the YouTube comments. Okay, this is so helpful. So I want to go a step further. So let's say somebody is at a place where they already have investments, they've got their retirement account, they maybe set it up a couple of years ago, but they're not in it consistently. And they, maybe made those like first initial investments or those, let's say, safer plays in like the S&P and then, Apple or Tesla, but it's not from a place of fully awareness, like not full awareness and knowledge, more so just like, oh, I think that this will do good. What is your recommendation for that person?
So the first thing that we need to talk about before we even get into the tactical piece of the investments, and we can definitely talk about that because I have some more recommendations on what you need to look for when you start auditing your existing accounts.
Okay.
But the first thing that you want to know is, what is your goal? And this is not super easy, right? Business goals are a little bit easier to set than this, but what are your financial goals? When do you want to retire? How much money do you want to have in retirement? And for a lot of people, that is just a random number that we pull out of the sky. A lot of people, one, don't have one. So don't feel bad if you're like, I have no idea what that is. Most people don't. So either we've pulled a number out of the sky and we're like, I hope I have a couple million in retirement, or we've never chosen a number because we honestly don't know. So the very first thing I would want to understand before we even get into your investing accounts is, what are your goals? When do you want to retire? How much money do you want to have in retirement? And then do you also have any other goals along the way? Because for example, if you have any big purchases coming up, maybe it's a big investment in your business, or you want to buy a house in the next 5 years, that's money that you really don't want to invest in the first place. That's money that you probably want to put in something like a high yield savings account, which, by the way, if you're listening to this and you don't have a high yield savings account, that is your homework because this is one of the easiest things to open. It takes you 15 minutes and it's basically just like a regular old savings account, which with a much better rate of return. So at the time of this recording, it's 4 or 5%. It fluctuates, but that's like free money. So go open one of those if you don't have one.
And can you do that through any bank account, or are there certain banks that have high yield and certain like Chase Bank or Bank of America, do they have high yield?
Some of them do, but usually the best rates are types of bank accounts that don't have a brick and mortar location. So one of my
Got it.
favorites is Ally. It's a much better user interface. It's more modern, it's easy to use. And that's an account that doesn't necessarily have a physical location, but most of the time you don't need that. But because they don't have the location, they're able to give much better rates. They're also easier to use. You can put your money into different buckets in Ally, which is great. And you can still get your money from ATMs if you need to. So I wouldn't necessarily go with the existing bank you have. I would look, you can even Google like top 10 high yield savings accounts in this month. Ally is usually on the top of that list. CIT Bank is another one that's pretty good. There's lots of them. The one thing you want to make sure for sure is that there's no minimums that you have to put in, which a lot of the good ones don't. And that it's FDIC insured, which basically just means if something happens to the bank, and people get really worried about high yield savings accounts that don't have a physical location. They're like, what if this bank just up and poofs, right? So an FDIC insured bank means that your money is insured up to $250,000 by the federal government. So really, if you look, most high yield savings accounts that are going to come up on those lists are going to be FDIC insured. So that's the first part is the short-term goals, because that's money in the next 5 years. That's not because investing isn't a great way to grow your money, but it's because the stock market fluctuates over time. So the average return of the stock market is roughly 10%, but on any given year, it could go up or down. And so if you have that money that you want to invest in your business or a house or something like that, and you put that money into the stock market, if you need to pull out that money at a certain time, it could be down. Whereas the longer you keep your money in the stock market, the more likely you're going to get a positive return. So I personally, I like the 5-year mark because historically speaking, 90% of the time after 5 years since the inception of the stock market has been positive 90%. So for me, those are pretty good odds. So, that means, again, I'll set another way. Historically speaking, if you invest your money 5 years later, with the hundreds of years that the stock market has been a thing, 5 years after you invested it, 90% of the time you had a positive return. 20 years, it's 100% of the time you've gotten a positive return. So the longer you invest in the stock market, the less risk you're taking on. So that's a really important stock market thing to know, because a lot of times we get nervous about investing, but truly one of the best ways to reduce our risk is to invest long term.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I love,
oh,
and I
sorry.
just want to interject real quick. I love that you say this because I think a lot of people have, because there's the emotional connection to their money. I know for myself personally, there's been times where I have watched certain companies go down and I'm like, ooh, ooh, and I like have to train myself of like, it's in here for the long term. Don't worry. It's like, it's going to go back up. And I think that you have to have like a long-term mindset with the stock market for any of the money that you're putting into it. If you're not like day trading, right? Like that's the
Yes.
only time that it would be a different.
Yes. And if you're thinking about day trading, I would highly consider you find another path because like 97% of day traders lose money. So anyone that you see online that has a sexy get rich quick scheme, they stop sharing that when they don't share when they lose money. They only share when they win money, and most of them lose money. So sidebar for you. So before we get into our investing, we're like, okay, we're setting our financial goals, right? So the first one is, all right, what are the short-term things that I'm going to need money for? After that, then the rest of your money can be used to either enjoy your life, which you should. You should invest every single cent that you have because we are here to live and love. But also, then it's like, okay, how much money do I want to have in retirement? And there's actually a way to figure this out. It's called the 4% rule. So this is the only like super mathy thing that we'll probably do today, but it's not too bad. And I know that a lot of people are like, I'm not good with money. I'm not good at math. You don't need to be good at math to be a good investor. There are so many calculators for everything. You need to just understand like the basics and the concept. So, but I don't want to scare you away with math. So anyway, the 4% rule says that you can withdraw 4% of the money you have in your retirement account for roughly 30 years without running out of money. So let me give you an example of why that helps us figure out how much money we want to have in retirement. Let's say you were comfortable living off $50,000 a year. You figured out that, roughly I'm going to have a paid off mortgage. I'm going to live a pretty chill life. I like doing puzzles, whatever it is. And you're like, $50,000 is enough for me. This is just for sake of example. That's probably not enough for most of the people listening to this, but just as an example here. If you had 1.25 million by the time you reached retirement. So let's say you want to work until you're 65 because you've created a dope business and you love what you do. So at 65, you're like, all right, I'm going to retire. If you had 1.25 million invested in the stock market, based on historical data, you would be able to withdraw 4% of that every single year without running out of money. And you'd be able to live off that amount as it continued to grow and as you continued to withdraw. And the reason this is called the 4% rule is because 50,000 is 4% of 1.25. So once you've reached 1.25, you can comfortably withdraw 50,000 every single year without running out of money. That's based on historical data. Could that change? Potentially, but it's been a pretty true rule of thumb.
So that is only when, like, once it actually reaches 1.25, that's when you can start to take out, or on the way to building the 1.25.
Once you reach that.
Got it.
Reach that. Yeah. So what's nice about that is that might sound like a lot to some people listening to this. That's why it's really important to learn the power of compound interest, because you don't need to invest $1 million to have $1 million in retirement. In fact, if you have $100,000 by the time you reach 30 or 40 and you invest $100,000, it's very likely you would be a millionaire based on compound interest, even if you didn't add another dime. 20, 30 years of investing your money in the stock market can triple, quadruple, whatever 5x your money is, right? So before you get like, oh my God, like I can't make or earn 1.25 million. Like I'm not going to make that, which you can, by the way. So don't be thinking that. You can. You don't necessarily have to make that money to grow. And that is why investing is so important, because of my wealth now, how much money I've earned is actually a small portion of the money I have, because most of my wealth has been built through investing. So that rule of thumb, that's just an example. So if you want to live off $100,000, you'd obviously need a couple million in retirement. And that rule of thumb is really helpful, because what you can do is figure out roughly how much you need to be investing now to reach that number. And what's nice is that there's easy compound interest calculators that can help you do this. So this is the first thing that I would suggest. You can even Google retirement calculator. I'll give you one to drop in the show notes here that you can play with if you want. But that's really important, because no matter how smart your investing strategy is, if you're not working towards a goal of investing a certain amount per month so that you can reach your financial goal, it doesn't really matter, right? Like you could be either over investing. Like I've actually had people that were investing, thousands of dollars every month when they could have been spending some of that money on their business because based on compound interest, they actually could afford that. There's other people that are investing a random amount without having clarity on where they want to go. And so that's really the first step. And this is something I teach in the program. And if that sounds overwhelming to you, please reach out to me. I have a resource that will help you like calculate this super quickly. But that's really important. You don't want to be investing just a random amount. You want to be investing a consistent amount per month that's going to help you get to your goal. And if you're not there yet, working on your cash flow to make sure that you can invest enough to reach retirement.
So basically what we're doing is reverse engineering from what we want when we are done working. So if we want, 2 million in retirement so that we can have like 75,000 or whatever the math is to live off of each year, that number is going to inform us of what we need to be putting into our investment accounts every single month
Exactly.
right now. And
Exactly.
that's based off of our age as well, too, because of the compounding interest and time we have till retirement.
Yep, exactly. 100%.
So the earlier you begin, the easier it's going to be, the faster you're going to get there. Okay, so then what's next? Because it's not just I'm putting this money into a brokerage account or an investment account. It's also I need to find the right stocks and places to put it. And I know that
Yes.
there's safer bets than others. So what is your theory and thought process when you are working with somebody who is, at that point where they're able to put consistent money into their investment account, but not necessarily going to be like studying the stock market every single day?
100%. And none of you need to be studying the stock market every single day. The type of investing I teach, you might look at your investments twice a year and make like small adjustments. So the good news is to be successful in this, you don't have to look at your stuff. And in fact, it's better if you don't, because like you were saying, Ava, a lot of times we look at the stock market and it's up and it's down and we start to get in our head. The best investors are people that put this stuff on autopilot and they just leave it alone and they don't do anything. Those are the best investors. So once you figured out roughly how much you want to invest per month, the second step is to figure out where you want to invest that money. So we've identified the bucket of money that we're going to invest for the future. The second step is where. And this is when you need to select an account type. So this could be a retirement account, like an IRA. If you have a full-time job, it's a 401k. If you're a business owner, this could be a SEP IRA or a Roth IRA. And all of these acronyms make this sound way more complicated than it is. But at the end of the day, the whole point of retirement accounts with acronyms is that they help you save on taxes. So as a business owner, you really want to make sure that you're investing, because not only is it going to help you build your wealth, but also you're going to save a lot of money on taxes every year if you are contributing to the right type of accounts. So that's the first step, is where is this money going to go? And in some cases, you might invest in a retirement account to save on taxes. There might be other situations where you just want to invest in a brokerage account, which is just a fancy name for regular old investing account. And what's nice about that is that you can take that money out whenever you want. So you don't have to wait until retirement like you do with retirement accounts. So that step 2 is learning about the retirement accounts. And it's not hard to learn. Some of them help you save on taxes now. Some of them help you save on taxes later. That's pretty much it. All of them fall into one of 2 categories. And a good accountant will help you figure this out. So if you are a business owner right now and your accountant is not having these conversations with you, you should definitely be asking them, are there retirement accounts that I can be contributing to help me save on taxes? And a good strategic tax strategist will help you do this. This is actually a good like green flag. If you have a good accountant is going to help you identify this opportunity. So that's a green flag if you have an accountant that's doing it. It's a bit of an amber flag if they're not. So that step 2 is, where does the money go? How are we going to use it to potentially save on taxes? Then to get to your question, how do we invest that money? And so what I said earlier is that the stock market fluctuates. On any given year, it could go up, it could go down. We should expect the stock market to, every 3 to 4 years, go down by roughly 20-ish%. That's what's called a bear market, if you've ever heard that in the news. Bear market means the stock market goes down for a period of time. So this is why it's so important to get a basic financial education, is because once you understand that the stock market is cyclical, that it's incredibly hard to predict. And by the way, for those of you that are like, trying to figure out when you should be timing the stock market, a good example of why that's really dangerous is if you think about January 2023, every single financial institution, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, the St. Louis Federal Reserve, all of them are saying we're going to for sure go into a recession this year. They're predicting like an 80% likelihood of a recession. The stock market went up 26%. And that's not because those people are dumb. It's because it's incredibly difficult to predict what the stock market is going to do. So before I tell you what the simplest ways to invest are, you need to understand that we know that the stock market fluctuates, but we also know, as you said, Ava, that the stock market goes up over time. So instead of trying to pick specific stocks that are going to be winners, which is super hard to do, the best strategies are to invest in what I call like the variety pack of investing. So instead of trying to read financial statements and understand different stocks, the best strategies are to invest in funds that represent a large portion of the stock market or even all of the stock market. So if you've dove into investing at all, you might have heard a little bit about something called an index fund. And index funds are my absolute favorite way to invest because they make it so simple for the average person to invest. So to break down what that is, index just means list. And Ava, you said an index already, the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is just a list of the top 500 largest US stocks. So if you've ever heard in the news someone say like the S&P is up or the S&P is down, what they're saying is that as a group, those 500 stocks are performing better or they're performing worse. That's all that's saying, right? So that's an index. That's an example of an index that's used to measure the overall performance of the stock market. So an index fund is a fund that you can invest in that holds hundreds or thousands of stocks at once. So you don't have to worry about picking stocks. And the reason that works is because, as we talked about, over time, the stock market goes in one direction. It's gone up, right? It's recovered to all-time highs every time it's crashed. So that is why it's so important to get a basic education, because once you understand the cycles of the stock market and how it works, you can invest in simple investment vehicles that don't require maintenance. When you create a simple index fund portfolio for yourself, which means like maybe 1 to 3 of these index funds, depending on how you invest in your strategy, you don't have to change them all the time because you've already bought almost every stock in the stock market. So you're just really just like buying a piece of all these different companies. And what's nice about that is you're de-risked, right? So you're not trying to like pick the winner, the needle in the haystack. You have the winner. It's somewhere in the fund that you chose. It's somewhere in the variety pack of companies that you're investing in. And so that's why I always suggest that book, actually, I suggested A Simple Path to Wealth is such a great book because it talks about this concept and how simple index funds make investing for the average person. And the thing of it is, like we talked a little bit about traders lose money. Most people that are trying to like beat the market by picking the right stocks, they lose money, not because they're stupid, but because it's just so hard to know what's going to happen and what's going to do best.
Can I ask you a question? So I just looked up what the VU is at, Vanguard, the S&P 500 for everybody. And right now it's trading at $496.77. So if somebody is getting into this, is there a way, what if they're only like contributing a couple $100 per month? Do they just wait until they have enough to buy one share of the VU? Or like what do you suggest for somebody who maybe isn't at a place where they can buy a big chunk of the S&P?
Yeah, so you actually can invest in it with a dollar amount. So you don't need to buy the whole share. It's almost irrelevant if you're investing in stuff like index funds or index ETFs, which is it exchange traded fund. It's similar. It's a group of stocks. If you're investing in those types of things, you can choose a dollar amount. Most companies that you invest through, they provide what's called fractional shares, so a piece of the share price. So don't even bother learn about index funds. Don't even worry about the share price. What you want to worry about is making sure you have enough money to invest in the first place, and then investing that money in funds that hold a variety pack of stocks. That's really the strategy we're talking about. So you don't even have to worry about the share price, which is super, super nice.
I just learned something new. That's awesome.
You can invest with like $10 if you want.
Yeah. And
You
you
don't
can do
even have.
that through it's not just like through something like Robinhood. You can do it through any bank account or brokerage
So
account.
not any bank account, any brokerage account. So brokerages are
Yeah.
where you can buy and sell investments. And if you think about it this way, just to make sure everyone understands, because this is a question I get a lot. So essentially, when you're investing, you choose a store to invest at, a brokerage. So that could be like Robinhood, Vanguard, Fidelity. All of those offer those fractional shares. Then you choose what type of account you want. So that's if you want, if you want a retirement account that's going to help you save in taxes, or you're just going to open a regular brokerage account. All of the places that I just mentioned, they have those. And then the final step is what you're going to invest inside of that. And then for those types of brokerages, yes, you can just choose a dollar amount. Not every single fund offers that, but the majority of index funds, when you start to learn the basics, like investing in an S&P index fund is a great place to start. It's not the only thing I would invest in, but if you're investing in that and that's all you start with, and then later you learn more, that's awesome. That's why I always say, like, you don't need to be an expert to get started. You just need some money. You need to choose an account and pick a fund that holds a bunch of different stocks. That's an amazing start. And then as you learn more, you might want to invest in other funds that target other areas of the market. But yeah, you can buy fractional shares at most major brokerages have no fee fractional shares.
Okay, cool. I'm definitely going to go into my Chase account and look at how I can do that. And hopefully I can do it. It's funny, I actually have accounts at Chase and accounts at Ally. And I made a note for myself. I'm like, go retransfer your savings back to Ally. Because during COVID, their high yield savings actually went down. So I'm assuming that it went back up since the beginning of the pandemic because it was high yield when I started and then it just kept tanking, tanking, tanking. And so I'm imagining that it probably went up since then.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's back to 4 or 5% right now.
Cool. Nice. Okay. So I wanted to switch topics really quick. I mean, same topic, but switch directions a little bit. As I was stalking your Instagram, there's a pin post at the top of your page that is a client win that went in 4 years from 0 to 100K in their savings account. Can you talk a little bit about like breaking down that process? Like, what did it look like? If somebody is starting at zero today, how can they set their sights on getting up to 100K in 4 years or maybe even less than that? Like, what is the
Yeah.
strategy of that?
Yeah. So, one, I think you should absolutely set goals like this. And I will say that this person first set a financial goal, which is why when you asked me what's the first step, you have to know where you're going and where you want to go, right? That is the number one thing. And I would say, in general, if you don't have $100,000 invested, that is a fantastic goal because, as I mentioned, that compound interest, she's going to be a millionaire by the time she's in her 60s, even if she doesn't contribute another dime, because the average return of the stock market, roughly 8 to 10%, that money will compound over time. And so $100,000 invested is a great goal. So if that sounds interesting to you, pick it, start with that. You can always change it later. So she had $0. She had actually been in a lot of debt. She had a lot of student loan debt. And so the first thing we did was look at her cash flow, how money comes in and out of her life. And she wasn't really paying attention to it. She wasn't necessarily an egregious spender, but she was spending money on things that didn't align with her values. So one part of, this is all emotional, right? Money is very psychological. And so the first thing we need to understand is like how money comes in and out of our life and how we feel about it. And she was honestly going through some turbulent stuff. And I think she was spending money, not really knowing where it was going. And so once we looked at it, the first thing was it was way easier for her to save and invest quite a bit than she realized because she never really tracked her money, her expenses, and not impact her lifestyle. Like she was still spending money on the things that she loved. She was an amazing athlete, actually. So she was still spending money to do amazing at her sport, but she wasn't spending money on stuff that she just didn't need. So that's the first step. The second step was taking advantage of the retirement accounts that she had. So she had a 401k through her employer that she wasn't maxing her contribution to. So the first thing we wanted to do was make sure she was taking a match, which is when your employer provides a portion of their paycheck and they match it for you. Not everyone has that, but if you have that, take advantage of it. But we also max that out. And so by maxing that out, she was able to reduce her income taxes by over $20,000. So then she got a
Wow.
tax refund and we invested that. So now she's saving on taxes, making money from the tax savings, and deciding that with that tax refund, I'm going to invest that money. So that was really like the beginning of that. She also invested outside of her 401k and invested in a brokerage account so she could have money that was flexible. And so she chose a very simple portfolio. She's invested in 3 index funds. And one of them is just like the S&P 500. She's invested in another index fund that invests in a bunch of international companies. And she's invested in a third index fund that targets small companies. And that's it. And she's left it there and just consistently contributed over the 4 years. She also did work really hard to increase her income, right? In a 4 year time period, you're going to reach 100K, not necessarily through investing. It's going to be through making sure that you are making enough. But once you make enough, if you can get that 100K invested, that's a life-changing amount of money.
Wow. And it feels so much smaller than I think we make it out to be, because like saying 100K is a life-changing amount of money, if we think about it from, just like our day-to-day living throughout the year, it's like, well, not really, but in investment terms, yes, really. And
Yeah.
I think that's what's something that's really exciting for everybody to think about is, of course, as you are investing and putting money into your investment account, you also are paying for life, your bills, your business expenses, et cetera. So it's not like all of your money can go there. But if you have that goal of 100K, I really think that the safety that you'll be able to create from that, just like for your system, I'm all about like nervous system safety. And so
Yeah.
it's like that safety that you'll feel of like, oh my God, I'm okay. Like I remember when I first got over 100K in my savings account, just my savings account, because I was saving for my house, that feeling was like, oh, I'm good. Like I don't have to let a feeling of lack or scarcity or like not enoughness take over me anymore, because the reality of my situation is that I'm good. I've got money in my accounts. So I love that. I'm so happy for your client as well too. And before we hit record, we were also talking about another one of your clients that was able to make a really big shift in their financial reality. And I'd love for you to just share this with everybody that's listening, because I think that this is another big piece that often holds us back from actually being able to make the money moves that we want to.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you nailed it, right? Like, this is about safety and security. Like, I'm not jazzed to teach people how to invest because I want you to go buy like fancy cars and mansions. If you want to do that, like, go for it. I love that for you. But that's not what I want. What I want is the security and safety. And when you take some of these steps, what women tell me after they go through my 4 week program, they're not like, oh, I chose all these investments and I'm doing all this math stuff. They say things like, I feel relieved. I feel safe. I feel like I can leave my job and spend all my time in my business and make a huge impact. I have more confidence to do things I thought I couldn't do. That's what learning to invest does. It's not about the actual skill of investing. That's easy. You can learn it very quickly. I mean, I'm happy to help you do it, but it's just all the other things that it gives you permission to do and to live boldly in a way that you didn't think you could, because you conquered the skill and now you're marching towards this goal that's going to give you flexibility and optionality. And so to lead into this other client, this woman was a total superhero, single mom of two. She owns a personal training business, and she's incredibly intelligent, terrified of money, hadn't looked at any of her accounts. And she had an old 401k when we were going through her money. And by the way, this is not the only person that this has happened to. There are so many women that have accounts just like floating around, and they either don't know how much money's in them or they don't know how they're invested. And both of those are really scary things, because one, the money in that could maybe be better used if you knew how the money was invested. Like, a lot of times these accounts that we have and we're like, oh, there's like this amount of money in that, is getting crushed with fees and we have no idea. And so that's what was happening to this woman, is that she had an old 401k that she hadn't looked at in 15 years. When I asked her to tell me where all her money was, she said, oh, yeah, I also have this old 401k. And at this point, we were calculating her net worth, which is how much money she has. So what she owns, her assets, minus what she owes, her liabilities. And she was like negative 60 was her net worth. She had 60,000 in debt and she had very little in savings, and she was pretty much flat. When we found the 401k, before we found it, she said, oh, I maybe have like 5 or 10,000 in there. I don't really know. We went and found it, that 15-year-old 401k, and there was $80,000 in that 401k. And she had no idea. So she went from negative 60,000 to positive 20,000. And like, can you imagine like the psychological shift and the confidence and the power that that gave her to dive into her business? And of course, she's been very successful. And she's not successful because she found that money. She's successful because she already was super powerful. And finding this money just gave her even more power to realize that she was on a better path than she realized. And it breaks my heart, honestly. Like, even if you don't have a secret account, I hope everyone has a secret account floating out there with $80,000. It's not super common. But what I would say is, if you're not really paying attention to your money, you might not realize how much you have invested already. And I would love to help you work with a compound interest calculator and see like that money that you have, even if it's small, what could that be if you invested it? And then if we added some to it, what could that be? And that's the power of learning how to invest, is like the possibilities of what your money can do without you having to spend a ton of time managing it and without you having to work harder. This is how we always talk about 10xing in our business, and that's super important. We all want to do that. But do you want to like 30x the money without any more work? Like, spend some time learning to invest, right?
100% you're hired. Oh my gosh. I mean, this just gets me so excited. And I hope that for everybody listening to, you are feeling just the accessibility of this being your reality. Tess, I feel like just even you breaking down that it doesn't have to be a lot of money that you're investing up front is such a relief because, like for me, like I was saying, like I look at some accounts and or some companies and I'm like, oh, well, it costs X amount of money for a single share. How am I going to be able to, buy a bunch of that? Or if I buy one, is it really going to make that big of a difference? And so I think that a lot of people probably have felt that too, just looking at the stock market and different companies or different funds prices. So I just feel lit up and ready to like make some money moves. And you've mentioned different ways to work with you. Your program, I'm sure you have one-on-one as well. Can you just share a little bit about how people can work with you?
Sure. So, my favorite way to work with people is in my 4-week program called Money Confident. And that is my favorite way because you all are busy doing amazing things. And so, the way this program works is that you can watch there's 4 modules. You watch a module on your own, and then we meet together to make sure you implement it. It's usually a small group, it's super fun. And I love like the quick transformation. Like by the end of 4 weeks, you're like, okay, I have my account open, or I know where my account is, and I know roughly how I want to invest my money. I've been able to create my own investing portfolio. You can do that. It's such a good feeling. Like when you go and you buy your first investment on your own, it feels so good. So that is Money Confidence. So it's a 4-week program. And by the end, you will learn how you can save on taxes using retirement accounts. And the other thing you're going to learn, and then how, of course, to invest your money in different types of index funds. And then the last thing, and this is really important that everyone should know, is that you will also learn more about the financial landscape itself. Because what a
Mm.
lot of women do is they either don't do anything because they're paralyzed with fear, which I feel you, I did that. So you're not alone. Or we're too afraid and we think we're not smart enough. So we just give our money to a financial advisor and stop paying attention. And that's a really dangerous thing to do. Not all financial advisors are bad, but a lot of them are incentivized in a way that's not in your best interest. And so you want to understand what fees you're paying them and what other options are out there. So even if you have an advisor and you're listening to this and you're like, I don't have to worry about this, you should really know what you're paying them. Because even if you're just paying a percent, that sounds innocuous, but a percent compounded over 10, 20, 30 years, depending on how much you're investing, could be up to like a quarter of your retirement, tens of thousands of
Wow.
dollars. Yeah. And so, again, I'm not saying like your financial is bad. Go out and fire your financial advisor. I know some wonderful ones, but you should at least understand how they're compensated and what you're paying for so you can decide if that's your best path. So, regardless of whether you're managing your money or not, you'll learn that too. So we do all that in 4 weeks. It sounds like a lot, but it's actually not because we have a really streamlined framework. And then you also get access to me. We chat live about whatever's holding you back. And we also have an awesome Slack community. So if you have questions after, you can always ask. So that is my favorite way to work with people. And then I do take one-on-ones by application only. So I have a couple spots, but they're not always open. So if you are interested, please be sure to reach out so I can put you on the wait list. But yes, I love working with people and I love helping you because it's so much easier than you think. And I'm so excited for you to take whatever your next step is.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and just sharing so openly. I know that I have received so much from this. Where can people find you? Like, what is the best way to get in contact? We're also going to link your program in the show notes as well too, so everyone can get access there.
Yeah. So the best thing to do, because this will give you a lot of the information I covered and some of the links, is to download the Savvy Investor Starter Pack. That is my free investing guide. And that will give you a lot of the things that we covered today. And then also my contact information. So that's at moneyconfidentcoach.com/savvy. And so grab that guide, look through it. There's so much information in there. There's even a free mini workshop in there that you can watch. So make sure you grab that guide, moneyconfidentcoach.com/savvy. That is definitely the best way to get in touch with me, or you can follow me on Instagram at Wealth with Tess. Mine has a blue check mark. There's a lot of people that copy accounts. So just be sure it's at Wealth with Tess with the blue check mark. There's so many financial scams out there. So you have to be really careful. If someone ever reaches out to you to ask how your money's invested, I'll never do that. Just be aware because a lot of finance coaches and investing educators like myself get copycatted. So important to know.
Amazing. Yeah, yeah. Definitely don't go transferring any money into Bitcoin through an Instagram DM.
Yes, please don't do that.
All right, everybody. Well, for those of you that are here live, I linked both the Savvy Business or Savvy Investor Starting Pack. Is that what you said it was called?
Mhm.
Yeah. Got the link in the URL is in the chat. Tessa's Instagram is also in the chat as well. So make sure to go give her a follow. Let her also know what was your biggest takeaway from today's conversation, or what are you going to take as your next step from today's conversation. Tess, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was such a fun conversation. You are literally a wealth of knowledge, and I just really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I love what you do. And yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love sharing this message because everyone